Or is it
perfect. It is perfect, and you are live with Andrew Morgan. By the way, I wanted to ask you, do your friends call you Drew or Andrew?
They call me Drew. Everybody calls me Drew.
Okay, so I guess, is it okay if I call you Drew?
Of course.
Good, because I was not sure. It's always a pity, man, and I'm not sure how to call people. So so today we will be also joined by Dr. Shawn Baker in around half an hour, and I was like, it would be really cool to have Drew and Shawn on the same podcast, because I guess Shawn doesn't even know that you were like able to convince a 10-year vegan to switch diets with a carnivore guy. So I'm really happy to tell him that and to see his reaction.
Yeah, he doesn't know me at all, I don't think, but I did comment to him and share him the video with the guy eating the meat for the first time the other day. So he was like, dude, awesome. So I think it's like his first time really making the connection, like, of who I am, because we've chatted a little bit in the DMs before, but nothing major. And I've never asked him to come on my show, and obviously hasn't invited me on his show yet or anything. So
yeah, but he had Elise there, right?
Yes, he just had Elise. He had Bobby. He's had a few of the carnivore people.
Awesome. So yeah, give us a little update. What was going on with you like during the last couple of weeks? Because I saw like, dude, you are on the live stream hustle, man, always on a daily basis, like live streaming with Duran Ryder, I guess also Tristan, and dude, like what's up with your life right now?
The YouTube thing has taken me by storm. Basically, 3 years ago, I bought a camera and I got some editing software, and I bought a laptop to move to Hawaii and start making a YouTube channel. And I really thought that I was going to start doing this. And I made some videos back then as a vegan. I thought that was going to be like my life moving forward. But then to Hawaii, like, the people around me weren't getting the same health that I was anticipating. I thought that everybody there was just going to be like these super healthy, athletic, people, but it was really more like a bunch of people dealing with a bunch of small health issues that they were all trying to sort of overcome and using each other as the knowledge base. So it was great. We all shared information and we're open and honest about our issues, but it was like people getting sicker and sicker, not necessarily shining stars of health that I was hoping for. So I didn't want to share much information back then. So once I did this carnivore thing, I started sharing. It immediately got a good response. I guess I was just slightly ahead of the curve in terms of sharing my experience with that. And I was, of course, one of the first of my friends to go public with the vegan to carnivore transition. So once this live thing started kicking off, I think it all started with the Elise interview that I did with her in the park when she was kind of following up about going ex-vegan, and all these people just hating on her. And then other people, I guess, just felt comfortable coming forward and speaking to me on my channel. And it's been great. I mean, most of the guests that I've had on, they've asked me to be on the show. So all the big vegans, ex-vegans that have come out, they're like hunting me down saying, hey, when can I get my interview? And of course, I'm going to just keep taking them as they come in. And and they're all personal friends of mine too, most of them. But I'm just going with the flow, man. Like, crazy interviews, like just posting clips now, trying to get more traction. My channel's kind of gaining traction a lot, which is great. And the main thing though is, I want to let people know, like, this is all still a work in progress for all of us, especially the recent transitioning vegans, myself included. So I want to make sure that the information that I'm putting out is still objective as possible. I'm checking in with myself, making sure that the information I'm sharing isn't just like, let's say I go to 50,000 subscribers tomorrow, my channel goes big overnight. Obviously that's going to come with money and notoriety, right? Like, let's just be honest here. I want to make sure that the things that I'm doing, I'm still giving the same information that I would if I had 100 subscribers, So that's very important to me. It's like maintain the integrity that I can throughout this thing. And of course, people are going to come and say what they want to say. But to me, that's like a huge principle, is to like remain objective and keep sharing the actual truths rather than trying to push an agenda and get to the top and then like enjoy that. And then you kind of get too big for yourself, like a Ravana who unfortunately, you see what happens. Like, she got so big, she couldn't even share her real food experiences. And then she gets caught. And then now like her business is probably going to be taking a huge hit for a while.
Yeah, so sad, so sad. So what I also like about your conversations is I can clearly tell you don't judge them. You know, when they come to your channel and they tell you, yeah, I'm not vegan anymore, I need to try something else. You're like one of the few guys that don't judge them. And I guess that's one of the big reasons why people actually flock to you to do interviews, because on the other side, on the vegan side, like it's exactly the opposite.
Mm. Yeah, well, if they were to go to interview with a like somebody posted on the raw alignment interview that I did, they said, let Freely interview her. Okay, what is that going to do for her? Like, she, of course, why would she want to be interviewed by Freely? It's just going to be a slander fest, you know, and she's going to come with her open and honest opinions, and Freely's just going to sit there and slam her and shame her and do that type of stuff. So, of course, I mean, I'm also eating animal foods as well, so I think that they feel comfortable like speaking to somebody who's also doing a similar diet. But
Mhm.
I do encourage them to be as honest and open as possible. And maybe they're a little bit reluctant until they come on my show, like Megan Elizabeth the other day. I mean, she's been consuming animal foods for several months, like 6 months now or something like that, and hasn't said a word about it in public. And not because she's scared to do so, but because she just knows that when she knows when the right time is and when the wrong time is. And her coming out in sort of a meek manner and not really sharing the full story and not having all the details to back it up is going to allow herself to be open to too much criticism. And I think she's very smart to do that. And I encourage anybody else. And just people who are watching this, like, they need to realize that this is this is just the beginning. I mean, there's obviously a lot of big namers who've already come out, but man, I got a DM today from somebody that's a big Instagrammer that, you know, is talking about potentially shifting back over because they saw Megan's interview now. So it's the domino effect is already going on, and vegans are obviously very upset with us for doing this. But man, it's not up to them. That, you know, I believe in human health, and that's what I want to. That's the agenda that I have, is
Yeah.
optimizing human health.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I also believe that because more people are getting educated on these topics. For example, me, when I became vegan like 3 years ago, I had no idea what the real study looks like. I mean, I still don't have a huge idea, but I
Mm.
had no idea what the difference is between like observational study, epidemiology, or like some mechanistic data. I was just like believing what everybody was saying, and now you have
Mm.
guys like Bart Kay. He was on Shawn Baker's podcast, like educating all of us like how to conduct studies, how to look at the research. And like 3 years ago, you just had like a couple of dudes on YouTube like sharing something they've read in a book, and it's just, for me personally, it's like a whole education, like the last 3 or 4 years, and then also trying out these different diets on my own body. Like this has been the biggest thing for me personally. And I know you're like one of the guys on YouTube. You're always saying like my personal experience trumps everything else, and I like that approach.
Yeah, something that I'm really pushing now, because vegans have their own little one-liners, you know, that, you know, you were never vegan, or like these little things. So something that I'm saying, and that's a tagline of my channel now, is you can't debunk my experience. So I want people who listen to this to stand proudly in their experience and trust themselves. And literally, we have a saying in English, trust your gut. It's a
Hmm.
very popular, famous, long time saying. And it's interesting that as a vegan, you're trained not to trust your gut, literally, because sometimes, I'd say in 50% of cases, long-term vegans just develop some sort of gut issues, and they're just told by other vegans to basically deal with it. I mean, Freely has even been said recently that, okay, so you have a little gas, you have a little farting, you think that that's worth, you think that animal lives are worth less than that, and she just doesn't relate it to the rest of the problem. Like, that's just one symptom, you know. We have to take the whole thing into account. That's just it's a big symptom, but it's just one of the things. There's so many different issues. I mean, if you listen to these women that have issues on a vegan diet, there's
Hmm.
the the list never ends, you know.
Yeah, losing the periods and stuff.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, almost every single woman that I know has lost their period. I asked Megan that the other day. Surprisingly, she only lost it during a water fast, she said, even though she was vegan for 10 years. But I know I know many other women that have lost their period for at least a couple months at a time, usually when they first go vegan, and then they regain it back, and they're just like, okay, I guess that was the body's recovered or whatever,
Yeah.
or it needed to happen. But we don't know. We don't know why it loses it for 3 months. I mean, the body is an amazing, resilient machine. But I also have another saying that I hate. People say that things will get worse before they get better. I really hate that. I do not believe that. I haven't seen a case where that's ever true, where things get worse before they get better. The only thing that's ever true is for working out, because you're consciously destroying your muscles to get them to grow back, right? Bigger and stronger. But that's not the way your body works. Your body doesn't tear down tissue to rebuild it on its own. No, it just starts building. It just starts healing. It doesn't get worse for no reason and then come back. That you don't need to get cancer before you get healthy. You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense. You just are healthy. That's the way it works. You fight the cancer where it stands and it's done, if your body is capable of doing so.
Yeah.
So I argue with somebody about that in my comments today, so I wanted to point that out.
I guess you need to argue a lot, to be honest, in your comments.
That's the other thing. You asked about the channel exploding. Like overnight, man, I have over 100 comments to answer now. I can't. I'm basically now. I'm just like I don't even know if I can really keep up with it. It's too much.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why you do so many live streams. Like people that want to really engage with you, not just like provoke you. They just come live and they ask you questions, or they engage. Because I mean, most people on YouTube. I mean, I guess Tristan said that YouTube is a big playground for mentally ill people. To be honest, I truly believe so, because sometimes you have like comments so out of context, so full of hatred. They don't even want to like engage with you. They just want to kind of take you down, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been around the internet since the very beginning, literally like 5 years old, using AOL online, chatting, chat rooms, gaming my whole life as a kid, a young kid on the internet, one of the first kids in my school to even have a computer and play online games. So for me, I mean, I've been deep in this disgusting internet world for a long, long time, dealing with these whacked out people. And to me, like, I can handle them well. I was in a way, I was built for this. Like, dealing with their comments, like they try to make me upset, but like I respond in such a way that triggers them even worse. I mean, you know, that's the problem though, is I have a face. They know what I look like. I don't know what they look like, you know? So some of these people are really mentally ill, and you do need to worry about that a little bit. So as things get bigger, I'm obviously going to have to back off that a little bit, but man, I enjoy really just they want to stab me. I got a bigger knife, man. Let's go.
Yeah. Totally. It's also kind of my guilty pleasure sometimes when I get some vegan comments, you know, to trigger them a little bit. But then later I think like, yeah, it doesn't help anyone, you know. I'd rather make a video or something else. But I know what you mean, totally. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, dude, like a couple of days ago, I saw on one of your live streams, like you had a tank top on. Did you make gains or did you lose some body fat? I was not able to tell, but you made good progress, dude.
Yeah, so I told you guys, like, the last 2.5 months I've been really cutting pretty deeply, pretty strongly. I lost, remember we talked a few weeks ago, you're like, oh, you need to lose 10 pounds to look that way.
Yeah.
So since that conversation, I've lost maybe 2 pounds, and it's made a big difference because I've really been digging deep on the fat. I've been just even watching what I eat even more. You know, even though the past 2 days I've had cupcakes each day. See, people, they're like, Drew, you know, now you're swung the other direction. You gone the other way of the pendulum. I'm like, you guys don't know what I'm eating. I'm eating cupcakes. I eat candy bars. Man, the way I eat now is luxurious. You know, but at the same time, I'm aware of calories. I'm aware of getting my protein in. And I would say, as a priority list in terms of losing body fat, like I said, I eat 2 meals a day. Very simple. I eat mainly carnivore. Now, the highest priority on that list for me is getting the protein in. You got to get the protein in. That's the minimum goal of the day, is to hit. For me, it's 150 a day. Boom. I need to hit 150. I do that and I go deep into the cut, even if I'm a caloric deficit of 500 calories, in my mind, and from what I've seen, my body is still hanging on to the muscle and it's only losing body fat from what I've seen. Now, I'm not making any power gains right now. I will admit that. I still feel strong when I go to work out. I still feel like I can complete my workouts. I'm not, you know, lagging behind or anything like that. But definitely, you know, I feel like my body fat is going down and I'm maintaining the muscle mass that I had. So yeah, I would say it's just a couple pounds loss, and that's what it looks like on me.
How is the food focus? Do you think a lot about food right now, or are you still like mentally sane?
No, I'm good. I'm totally good.
Yeah. Good.
I don't eat until 2 or 3 p.m. usually. Until then, I'm totally fine. I don't even think about it. And it's funny because I got criticized. You know, I think you're drinking tea or coffee over there, yeah?
Tea, yeah, tea. It's too late for coffee.
Okay, so I got my morning coffee here. It's only 10:30 in the morning, but I've been criticized for drinking caffeine too much, and it's
Yeah,
funny
sorry.
because it's like, man, I'm not eating till 2 or 3 p.m. What am I gonna do? Drink water all morning? That's boring. I want something, and it's like, to me, this is nothing. If your vice is drinking 1 cup of coffee a day, to me, you've made it to the top of the health chain. Like,
Yeah,
you got nothing to worry about at that point. If that's your worst thing that you do, so I don't take those criticisms to heart. I think it's a kind of a joke for people to have that issue. And on top of that, I was drinking way more caffeine as a vegan, so whatever.
yeah, yeah. I mean, caffeine is a kind of a good drug, especially when you're cutting. Like right now, me personally, I stopped to drink caffeine for like 2 weeks right now to resensitize myself. And then when I will cut, or when I have like more things to do, you start to drink coffee again, and you just really feel how it hits you even harder. But especially when you're cutting, to drink coffee, it kind of inhibits your appetite. So I mean, it's the best way to get your caffeine in is just when you're cutting, especially when you do like intermittent fasting during your fasting window. So I used to do that as well, and it's just a good tool. And then again, vegans will always find something they can criticize, like now it's the coffee, then you stop drinking coffee, then it's something else, then it's perhaps the milk, then it's the raw milk, then you cannot go without carbs, then you know what I mean. It's like, it's
Well,
endless.
so in my video where I had the vegan guy, the experiment video where he eats his first bites of food, it's interesting, and I tried to expand on that in the moment, but it was difficult because I wanted to give him that moment in the show, but he was like, I have my meat here, and I'm starving, and it's getting cold, and he's like, you could see he was stressed out
Yeah,
because he's coming off 10 years veganism, and he's his carbs are low at that moment, and his blood sugar is just dipping like crazy, and it was only noon. Like, he was like already losing his mind at noon, because he's probably used to eating at 8 in the morning every day as a vegan. And once you have your carbs, when you eat a bunch of carbs and you don't eat for like 10, 12 hours, your body goes into like panic mode, basically, because your blood sugar is just going down and you're losing your mind. And he was only at noon. I mean, I fast till 2 p.m. every day without even thinking about food. And he was at noon, scraping by. He's like, yeah, I had to fast all morning. It's like, I fast till 2 p.m. every day, and it's not even a thought.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was interesting to like see that.
yeah. I was fascinated by that video. I guess you're the first guy that made it happen, right? To convince a 10-year-old vegan to eat meat on YouTube. Like, that's a big accomplishment, man. That's like the vegan assassin nickname. That's really worthy the nickname.
Everything that happens on my channel, here's why I'm the vegan assassin. It's not because I go to them and I take the fight to them and I talk to them. They absorb my content. They watch me. They don't like me. The reason why I push people over the edge and I piss them off the way that I do on purpose is because they have a reason to argue with me. They have a reason to dislike me. Good. I want that, because then they go on the internet and they're typing in Google debunk carnivore, and they're finding all this information, and they're seeing people argue on both sides. We got a problem, because the carnivore arguments are better than the vegan arguments. And this is where the downfall is for everybody. Once they start in that conversation, they will eventually, if they're open-minded and they're actually smart, which a lot of them are. I think a lot of vegans are smart. They went vegan for good reasons. You didn't go vegan because you're a dummy. I didn't go vegan because I'm dumb. There was good science, maybe misrepresented science or cherry picked data, but we were doing our best to think with the information we had. And that's what I think ENFPs do very well, is when they're presented with new information, they can adapt. I think that's
Yeah.
a very strong point of an ENFP. They don't get attached to ideas that are old. If you're
Yes.
presented with new data, you're willing to, because you want to be your best, try your best. And when you have new good data, you're going to do your best to make sure that stuff's accurate, of course, but you're going to move forward. And I think that's a big strong point of the ENFP. So anyways, these people, they want to argue, they want to research things against me, and then next thing you know, I get a DM from them a week later, a month later, dude, you pissed me off, but like, I actually looked into a little bit, and now this whole thing happened. So hey, man, it is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Good points. Also, talking about the ENFPs, like as soon as you announced that on your channel that a lot of your friends have been vegan, or are vegan are ENFPs. I was also looking at my friend circle, and actually it was also the same for me. Like a lot of them have been, or I mean, they are still ENFPs or are extrovert. And I was asking myself why that is, but I guess you're totally right with that non-attachment to like ideas, always looking for like new knowledge, or like constantly like reading and trying out stuff, and also just being on the internet and interacting with people. That's also a big thing. But then on the other side, I guess a downside of that personality type, at least for me, is like the emotions. Like as soon as the emotions are getting into it, like I make a lot of emotional decisions as well. So that's perhaps not the best thing.
Well, I think that ENFPs are sensitive, and I've been offended by somebody calling me sensitive in the past, but now after being around so many other ENFPs and I've learned a new definition basically for what sensitive means to me, and maybe you can take this as well. Because how old are you again?
25.
25. All right, so I'm 33. So, let the old man pass some knowledge to you, some wisdom. Okay, when I was your age, I was, no, even a little bit older than you. I was getting a job for a sales company, and basically things were not working out very well in that company for me. Things were working out great. The management loved me. The vice president loved me. They promoted me like crazy. But I wasn't cut out for that type of outside sales business. It's very like grind. It's a grind. People shutting the door in your face all day long. And I was like, I didn't like the way that I felt doing that job, like emotionally. And when I was trying to explain to these guys that situation I was in, they were just like, yeah, you're just too sensitive to do this job. And I was like, fuck. Like I was sensitive in that moment. Fuck you guys, like I wanted to like react,
Yeah.
But the thing is sensitive doesn't mean you're weak. It's not a weakness. It just means like an instrument. Some instruments are more sensitive than other instruments, and you want some instruments are the right tools for the right job. If you're trying to measure sound frequency with a voice, you need an instrument that measures vocal frequency. But if you want to measure frequency that is not even hearable by the human ear, you need something that's more sensitive. Doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It's just a different type of sensitivity in that instrument. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, totally.
So the way that we pick up on things is just different in a different way. There's people who I admire so much that are sort of desensitized. They're not sensitive at all. And I admire the way that they just plow through life in certain ways like a rock. But they also are ignoring a lot of things at the same time. And the problem with them is they're going to get it on the back end. See, sensitive people, we deal with our issue right on the surface, right up front. Because we're like, whoa, I don't like that. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. But people who are not sensitive, they're able to like plow through, push through, and they get a lot of stuff done that way. But then in the end, 20 years later, they're like, oh yeah, that stomach ache I've had for 20 years. Now I'm dealing with it. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like we could have dealt with this 20 years ago before it destroyed your liver,
Yeah.
And that's why I think in ENFP, like one little thing goes wrong. We're like, whoa, how do we fix this? Let's start researching this. Veganism? All right, sounds good. Let's do it overnight.
Exactly. Literally.
Yeah. Oh, veganism isn't working since day one, and we're being honest about it, and we're talking to people about it because we're extroverts. Hey, how's it going with you? How's your digestion over there? Blah blah blah. Let's move to Hawaii. Let's be around vegans that we don't even know a single one of them. Right? It's like you're just willing to jump into these situations, and that kind of makes that personality type different.
Yeah.
And another thing too, the ENFP. So INFJ and INTJ are both very rare in the context of the world. There's only combined of INTJ and INFJ is only about 3% total combined, whereas ENFP is more like 8% in the general world. So in the vegan community, I would say ENFP probably accounts for 50% of the people. There was definitely 50% in Hawaii, definitely 50%. So that's way higher than the average. And then you take the INTJ and INFJ in Hawaii, and those were about 20 to 25%. So the average of 3% goes up to 20 to 25% in the context of a vegan community. It's almost accounting for everybody. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, totally. I'm also so glad you mentioned the sensitive part of the ENFP, because it's something I just realized 2 years ago. And in the beginning, I struggled a lot with that, especially as a guy. You know, you want to be tough, you want to be this tough guy, like never. I mean, I didn't cry a lot, but sometimes I was also really emotional. And I'm just so glad you acknowledge that, because I also realized then when I was reading books about highly sensitive people, I realized that we have the strong side of really picking up of emotions of other people. So like emotional connect, we can go into a conversation. And as an ENFP, I guess you know that when I go into a conversation with a new person, I need to be careful not to go too deep in the beginning. You know, like I can go like the deep end really quickly and like make friendships really, really fast. And it's something I had also to deal with. But it's really beautiful how you said, like, every personality type has its strengths to it. And as an ENFP, especially, what I realized for myself is I'm also more influenceable, I guess. You know, like other people can influence me more, especially because I'm so sensitive. So you kind of also need to be careful not to go into like negative environments or negative situations, and also be around positive people. But as soon as I'm in an environment where I thrive, where I'm with other people, with positive people, like this ENFP, this good ENFP side really shines through. And also like with doing podcasts or YouTube, like you do as well, I guess we do pretty good in conversations with other people, and especially when we talk about topics we're passionate about. I really like that side.
Definitely. And you can pick up on other people's, like you said, you're picking up on their emotions, and that's what a lot of conversation is seeing where that person is at. You know, if you're talking to them and you're judging their reactions, you're judging their character, you can see what interests them. And I think that's why people like ENFPs on a natural basis, because the ENFP naturally knows how to steer the conversations in a way where that person's interested in talking about it. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Somebody about something that they're not interested in.
Exactly.
And that goes back to the sales problem that I had with that company, because I don't like salespeople trying to sell me stuff that I don't want. I just hang up. I don't even answer the phone. And if I do, I hang up the phone. I don't talk to them or anything like that. So it's very hard for me to be that person and be that person that's annoying other people, because I get that negative feeling that they have towards the salesperson, and it's put on me.
Exactly.
And I'm too sensitive for that, you know? And because it's not like a person, I have no personal connection with it. To me, it's like selling my soul a bit. Now, when it comes to YouTube comments and people hating me for the things that I say, that's fine, because this really is me and I'm proud to be this way. So it's a difference. It's like, I don't like sales guys, so I don't like being a sales guy, but I like being this guy with information to share and help people. And if people have an issue with that, that's fine, because I'm confident in my stance. It may change in the future, but for right now, this is what it is. And I don't mind standing in that zone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of online battling and all that stuff is people. I see Shawn there. A lot of online stuff there is
Baker.
posturing, like
Awesome.
stand in the ground the most, you know? So anyways.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting you. So
No.
Awesome. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, Hank, can you give me one? I'm just gonna grab a glass of water. I just got done. I just literally came off another podcast, so let me grab a glass of water and I'll be right back.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. Sorry, Drew, I was interrupting you.
It's all good. I was just to finish that thing for anybody who is actually following that wild train of thought was yeah, a lot of people are just posturing against each other online to see who's like stronger, like they'll challenge you, and if you stand strong in your position, they will back down. This is just the way that it works. So I just want to point that out to people. Like, a lot of people will challenge you in the comments or make videos about you or whatever, but if you just stand there and say, yeah, that's what it is, then they will actually say, oh shit, like I actually challenge somebody who is confident in what they're saying.
Yeah, and they don't respond, perhaps.
Then they disappear.
Yeah, awesome. So awesome. Thank you for taking the time, Dr. Baker. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I've got right at about an hour, guys. So I got another podcast to do in about an hour. So awesome. Anyway, I'm happy to get going.
No problem. By the way, I just watched your last podcast you did with Bart K, and I like the story of your first Iron Maiden concert, dude. That had me laughing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was a little 14-year-old kid. You know, I didn't know what to expect. You know. Yeah, that was my second concert after seeing Phil Collins, which kind of gently brought me into the world of concerts, and then going to Iron Maiden was a fun thing. Yeah, so
good stuff. So yeah, before you're already live, but before we go into the topic of the carnivore diet, or basically of your experience, I want to introduce you my co-host for today, Andrew Morgan. He's actually the boyfriend of Elise. I know you had her on.
Oh yeah, I had Elise. So that's Drew Morgan, right?
Yeah.
Drew, yeah.
He goes by Drew. Oh, cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been seeing some of your stuff. Yeah, good stuff, man. So awesome. Yeah, good to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we call him the vegan assassin. I guess you have seen that he convinced a 10-year vegan to eat meat on camera, dude. This was like
I heard you say something about that. I have to see how that goes. You'll have to look at the link, and maybe you can share that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's like I had Bobby Bobby Risto on, and he's unapologetically ex-vegan. I see a lot of the vegans they become ex-vegans, and they come out with I'm so sorry. I really want to continue to be vegan, but I'm just too sick to do it. And it's, I think it's interesting. Some people are saying, no, vegan's a mistake, and I never want to do that again. And I think it's a problem. So I think it's interesting to see that those different perspectives come out.
Yeah. And it's also good that you give them a platform to share their ideas. But I also talked to Drew before, and I said, if you don't judge them in front of the camera on YouTube, like they really come out with all the information. And that's what the movement needs right now, in my opinion.
Well, I think we need balance, because I think the message from the vegan community is it's all wine and roses, and everything is perfect, and you're going to be the healthiest you've ever been in your life. And it's, the world is going to be a better place if we're all vegans. And I think, it's not that I oppose people from being vegan. I think for children, it's a bad idea. I'll just be honest about that. But I think that, I think we should have an open discourse and have a counter message out there. And I think, we've got organizations like PETA that are literally just spewing propaganda 24/7, and they're well funded, and we don't have anything to sort of counter that. And some people will criticize me for being critical of this, but I think at the same time, I don't have an organization that's going to do it for me. And I think that, animal-based nutrition is a very important option for people. I don't think, again, this isn't that I'm advocating that 7 billion people become carnivores. I think that's a stupid straw man argument that we have people putting up there. I say some people do better this way, and I think they should be allowed to do that, and we should explore that, and we should be open to that idea, and not sort of say, well, if you can't feed every single person the same food, then no one should eat it. I mean, that's just a ridiculous argument.
Totally. Yeah, I also need to be honest with you, because 1 year ago, I was still on a vegan diet, and I watched the Joe Rogan podcast like quite frequently. And the first time I saw you on the podcast, I was like, my mind was like, I had no idea what to think, because I was like, a guy that just eats meat, he still lives. He seems kind of healthy. He's strong. It was my reality was kind of breaking down, and I was just like not watching the whole podcast. But then when I watched Bobby Risto's videos, I decided to come off the vegan diet to try something new, to be omnivore again. And then I rewatched that podcast. And it's funny, when I rewatched that podcast, I picked on, like, my brain was picking on all the things, I was kind of watching the same podcast, but I was like getting in other types of information. My whole mindset basically shifted. It was just interesting to see how my perception just shifted by changing my whole diet, by changing my beliefs. So when I was watching your video, first, when I was vegan, I knew you did no blood test at all. And then I was like, yeah, he did no blood test, like his diet cannot be healthy. I guess he did no blood test because he already thinks that his blood test will be bad. But now rewatching the podcast, I realized, dude, the blood test can be bad on paper or good on paper. It doesn't say a lot, basically. It doesn't say a lot.
Well, I mean, I'm a physician, and I've literally administered or read thousands upon thousands of labs, and we look at them all the time. We see labs that are not within normal range, and most of the time we just ignore them because we're like, it doesn't match with what's going on clinically. And we have to realize that our blood tests, they vary so much, even by hourly. I mean, you can get a vitamin D level taken at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it'll be low, and you can get it taken at 3 in the afternoon, and it'll be in perfectly normal range. And so you have to realize what a blood test tells you in the context of what's going on clinically. And so while more and more people have access to blood tests now, and they can say, well, this tends to be associated with this, it doesn't always mean that. And so I think more important things that we can look at and assess, are more difficult to get, but they really tell us what's going on. And one of the biggest things, as simple as it is just simple body composition. Most people that have a decent waist to height ratio are generally healthy. Most people that have low amounts of visceral fat are generally pretty healthy. Most people that have good exercise capacity are generally healthy. Now, there are some exceptions, and sure, healthy, fit people die all the time, but that's the exception, not the rule. And so when we look at things like coronary artery calcium scans, which I had done, and it shows zero calcification in my arteries, those things show us real world what's going on over in a chronic situation, not this, what's going on for 5 seconds while you drew your blood. I mean, that can be used in an acute setting. If you have a patient that's acutely ill and you draw their blood and their hemoglobin is 6, you're like, well, that person is bleeding somewhere. That becomes helpful. But when you have somebody walking into the door and they're completely not acutely sick, those numbers can change for a lot of reasons. And so we have to be honest with that and say that what blood tests actually are really, really helpful. When are they helpful, and what clinical context do we put them in? And so that's the point. As someone who's uses blood tests or has used blood tests for situations, when I would do knee replacement with somebody, I would check their hemoglobin, because if it was low, they were bleeding, and I would have to go back and maybe take them back to the operating room and stop some bleeding. But again, you have to understand what those blood tests mean in the clinical situation that they're being interpreted in.
Yeah, good point. I guess you also know his name is David Feldman. He also does a open blood test on YouTube. He does experiments with like cholesterol and all that good stuff. And I don't really remember what it was, but once or twice he did a cholesterol test without fasting for 12 hours. And then, or a blood lipid test, better to say, with fasting for 12 hours, and then one without fasting. And both tests were basically like night and day. And also here in Switzerland, actually, they don't tell you that you need to fast before the blood test. They tell you, yeah, it will be good if you fast before the blood test, but you don't need to. But if you fast or not, this will skew your results big time. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, dude, they have no idea what they're talking about, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Dave's done some wonderful work just showing the dynamic variability of cholesterol. I mean, he literally can drop his LDL cholesterol 100 points in a week. And I mean, if it changes that much, and we're going to just go in and pick it on some random day and make a lifelong decision, put you on some lifelong drug potentially based on one lab test. And doctors do that all the time. People will come in with a slightly elevated LDL cholesterol or even a moderately elevated LDL cholesterol, and they'll put them on a drug for the rest of their life. And I mean, people don't even question this. And when we see that it changes, literally within a couple of days, it's kind of just insanity in my view.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a question for you, Dr. Baker.
Yeah.
Are you aware? Sorry, I wasn't sure what happened there. Are you aware that the vegans are criticizing that CAC, even though your buddy Dr. Joel Kahn is a huge proponent of the CAC? Do you realize that have you heard anybody kicking you any flack for that? Because I've seen people, like, I've used the fact that you have taken the CAC after eating meat only for 2 full years, as well as Eric Berg with his YouTube channel. He did a CAC around the same time you did, and people are still the vegans are still not happy enough with that result. They're like, okay, a score of 0 doesn't mean anything. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I heard when I announced I was going to do it, I had people saying, "Oh, that doesn't show anything." And again, most of the cardiologists out there will accept the CAC as a very powerful tool. What it doesn't show is something called soft plaque. And so, calcified plaque is something that shows what's been going on in your heart for a period of time. There could potentially be some soft plaque built up there. That's true. However, if you have a 0 coronary artery calcium scan, the likelihood of soft plaque is extremely, extremely low. So while it doesn't show you everything, it shows you that now if I had some calcium in there, the risk of soft plaque goes way, way up. And so again, it's still the best possible result you can get there. And after age 50, and I'm 52 now, maybe 25% of the population has a CAC score of 0. And so I'm in the top 25% of low risk on that metric. And then, if I put all the other stuff in, I'm extremely low risk. If you run my numbers through a MESA calculator where it looks at cholesterol, including my elevated LDL, which is about 140. And if you put in CRP and triglycerides and HDL and so on and so forth, my risk for cardiovascular disease is like 1%. It's like super low. It's like as low as you can possibly get. I mean, you couple that with the fact that I've got a tremendously high VO2 max, just won a world championships in rowing, which is, for anybody who's not tried it, it is incredibly, cardiovascularly taxing for particularly what I do. And so, I'm aware of the criticism from these guys, but they're not, the result would be to say, why don't you get a CT angiography? Well, that would require an invasive procedure, potential risk, for somebody to basically run, a dye into my heart, through something, and it's unnecessary. There's no reason to do that. If I was symptomatic, if I had a zero coronary artery calcium scan and I was symptomatic and I was having chest pain or something like that, then medically that would make sense. But I mean, there's no real reason for you to do this advanced testing just to make some vegan happy. Because even then they're going to say, well, you're just a genetic outlier. It's a never ending no-win situation. So I mean, it's like, of course they're going to criticize that. They're going to criticize stuff until they realize that they're sick, and then they change their mind. But until they get sick, they just don't. Some of them that aren't invested in it as heavily. I mean, there are vegans out there that their whole ideology is bought into it. That's who they are, and until they are forced to change, whether through illness or something else, they never will.
Yeah. Drew, you wanted to say something before?
Well, there's that. Yep.
I'll be right back. Hang on just one second, guys.
No worries. Good stuff.
Yes. I have a couple questions for him, actually,
Cool.
just regarding like end-stage vegans. How many carnivores is he seeing come from veganism? I'm interested to see if he's got like a lot, because obviously a lot of our audience is going to be ex-vegans that are coming to us being like, hey, I'm doing this now, but I wonder, like, on his front, how many of those people, because I don't hear from the omnivores that go carnivore. They never heard of me in the first place.
It's a good point. Good point.
I've got my little dog here, my carnivore dog. If he keeps barking, I'll have to eat him, right, Maximus?
Maximus, nice.
If you're a real carnivore, that's another criticism that we get all the time on our channels.
What is that? If you're a real carnivore, you have pointy teeth and you eat your meat raw. Is that the only way you can eat meat? Apparently.
Yeah. Here's a funny thing: is bonobo monkeys, right? They're the closest relative to human beings. However, if you actually Google bonobo monkey, they have some big old canines on them, similar to a wolf's. And it's so funny that the argument that vegans use is so easily debunked in about 2 seconds. You just go to Google Images and look what a bonobo monkey's teeth look like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the insanity is, to realize, I mean, humans speak. I mean, our jaw structure was dependent upon a number of things. It wasn't, and our dentition was not all related to what we eat. But I mean, certainly, I can eat meat with my teeth and it works just fine. I mean, you think about it. I mean, I can sit there and gnaw on a bone with the teeth I have right now and it works perfectly well. So to say that we can't do that is crazy. To assume that we have to hunt down our prey with our teeth is silly. I mean, if you look at what's the largest carnivore on the planet? I mean, it's a blue whale. Blue whales don't even have teeth. I mean, they have a balun, and all they do is filter in these, these krill. So, I mean, to make the argument to have to be a carnivorous animal, you have to have sharp, pointy teeth. I mean, look at, there's lots of carnivorous animals. Hell, there's even carnivorous plants out there. So there's a lot of different evolutionary adaptations to acquiring meat, and humans, fortunately, developed a brain, and our brain allowed us to acquire meat through, cooperative hunting and tool building. And that's been around in place for 3 million years. So, I mean, to say, I mean, there were humans, or not humans, there were hominids. I wouldn't even say hominids. I would say there were, primates that when global climate change happened about 3 million years ago and the world got dramatically cooler and the terrain changed and primates were forced to adapt, to the new climate change. Some of them tried to become, vegetarians or vegans, living in the grasslands, things like Australopithecus boisei and Paranthropus robustus. I mean, the Nutcat, which was called, well, the first one was Nutcracker Man. Both of those guys went extinct because they just could not, continue to compete with the continued climate change. And so humans evolved all of our evolutionary adaptations, our mobile throwing. I mean, what did the vegans think we were doing? We were throwing rocks at coconuts. I mean, why do we have a throwing arm? I mean, this is why we developed that. Why do we have a gastric pH of 1.1 to 1.5? I mean, we have the same gastric acid pH as things like hyenas and vultures, because we started out scavenging meat, and then as we got more and more intelligent, we figured out how to kill those animals. And then by about 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus figured out how to easily take down megafaunal animals. I mean, once they had spear technology, it was game over. And that's why these megafaunal animals eventually went extinct about 25,000 years ago, because we just started hunting them. As we got, a bigger and bigger population base, we just started hunting these things to extinction.
Yeah, to me, that's the smoking gun. Honestly, the digestive system, when you really look at the fact that we don't have a fermentation chamber, when we have the super low stomach acid, I don't understand how there's even an argument at that point. That was the thing that really opened my eyes to begin with, was understanding the biology. And vegans don't like mechanistic data for some reason. But when we understand how something works, 1 + 1 = 2. Why can't we use that as part of the evidence? You know what I mean? They want to say that, oh, that doesn't matter. What do you mean that doesn't matter? We know exactly how things digest in the body in terms of their biology in a cow, but they want to ignore that data.
Well, I mean, to be fair, some of them say, yeah, that's true. We did use meat to survive. It's helped we evolve, but we don't have to do that now, because now we have technology. Now we have mass transport. Now we can get acai berries from South America, and we can get avocados from Kenya, and we can get fresh fruit flown in 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we can get algae supplements, and we can eat our flax seeds and cobble together this diet that no human could have ever possibly had, ever. I mean, a lot of these foods aren't even on the same continent. And so to say that's what we can do now, it becomes the argument. And even with that, even in the best case scenario, many people struggle and fail on the diet. And so to say that all of us need to do that, I think is just, it's just incredibly short-sighted, and will result in, just a sick population, quite honestly.
I agree. I wanted to ask you, how many of the people that you talk to, that reach out to you through social media or that you work with in real life, how many of them are coming from veganism, or are most of the people that you talk to coming from just like an omnivore diet looking to get healthier? They saw you on Joe Rogan or something.
Yeah, I'd say I probably have, of the people that I'm kind of aware of that have kind of transitioned over, I'd say probably about 20% seem to be vegan, ex-vegan, and the rest are either, many of them are coming from a ketogenic background. I'd say probably people already on a low carb diet are the most likely to do it, and the other group that's most likely to do it are sort of vegans, because if you accept veganism, if you think what type of person will do a vegan diet, is somebody that's willing to already do something fairly extreme. I mean, because most people think, let's be honest, most people won't adopt a vegan diet because they just think it's kind of crazy. And if you've already bought into that, hey, I'm just going to go out on this spectrum, then you're just as likely to go the other way. And a lot of people, particularly as they see that, okay, veganism didn't work out for me, it made me really, really sick, and meat helped me. Well, guess what? Maybe eating lots of meat, maybe eating all meat helps me even more. And so there's people where they're kind of like, if a little's good, then a lot must be better. And whether that's true or not, I mean, I certainly think that eating lots of animal products is great. But I think there's people that are because they feel so much better. They have their first bite of salmon or whatever, or they get some eggs, and they say, wait a minute, I feel a lot better. Then they start saying, well, what about if I eat a lot more of this? What happens? And then I mean, there's a lot of them out there that are now former vegan, now carnivore. And, I mean, the nice thing is you have this wonderful kind of case comparison study, because you have somebody that, yes, they've tried a plant-based diet, and yes, they've tried a carnivore diet, and they can tell you clearly which one's better, at least in their particular situation. Now, I have not seen, to my knowledge, anyone that's done the opposite, or at least not anybody that's sort of
my experiment
with long-term. I mean, I've seen a few people that have done like 30 days vegan for 30 days carnivore, but no one has really said, they were lifetime carnivore doing great and then said, oh my gosh, I'm going to go vegan and spend the rest of my life as a vegan. I've not yet seen anyone do that. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. Perhaps I've seen some people that have done carnivore and said, it wasn't for me. I'm going to include a little bit of vegetables. But usually what they end up doing is they stay heavily meat-based. They still are quote unquote carnivore adjacent. They still eat lots because they realize how important the animal nutrition is for the diet. So they eat a lot of meat or eggs or fish, dairy, and then they add some other stuff in there, some fruits, some vegetables and stuff like that, and that's fine too.
Are we seeing any issues crop up with really long-term carnivores? Because in my community, I haven't come across any long-term carnivores yet, but you have posted recently, I think, about like a woman. She's like a 10 plus year carnivore. She's looking great. Her body's just super fit looking. And you don't see that with long-term vegans, by the way. So
I'm not aware of anybody that's been doing it long term that's gotten health issues. Now, certainly there are people that just quit, and not generally not because they had health issues. There's some people that, I've seen a few guys that say, well, I just couldn't put on enough muscle, because I couldn't take enough calories in. I've seen that for sure. But to say that I've seen people that have gotten, acutely ill or chronically ill or anything like that, I'm not really seeing that to any significant degree at this point. Doesn't mean it won't happen.
Right.
But to this point, I haven't. And, again, this carnivore sort of craze is, kind of relatively new. We'll find out as time goes by. Vegans have been at it since 1940, 44, whatever the Vegan Society started, something like that. So you've got 50, 60, 75 years of that to kind of fall back on. So I don't know yet. Maybe there will be, but I guess the nice thing about the carnivore sort of approach is it's not dogmatic. And so if you say, well, I'm struggling because I'm not getting in enough of, I don't know, whatever, folate, you can easily add that back into the diet and without sort of becoming a pariah. I don't think there's any, because you see what happens to a lot of it, and probably yourself, a lot of it, vegans have probably attacked you or both you guys, who knows, for coming out and saying, I'm eating meat again. Now you're an evil animal killer. Freely the Banana Girl will say, how could you go back to eating animals because of your digestive problems? Why can't you just suck it up and lose a couple teeth? What's wrong with you? You're not going to see that coming from the carnivore camp. We're going to say, if it doesn't work for you, great, do whatever you want.
Yeah. So are you noticing anything with end stage vegans? By the way, I love that term, end stage vegans, going back to like a heavy animal based diet. Like I myself had zero issues. Of course, I went through like the keto flu as to be expected about 7 days in when I did my first carnivore experiment, going straight from 5 years vegan to carnivore overnight. But and the reason I asked this is because I do have people that reach out to me that want to jump on carnivore, but they've been vegan for 6, 7, 8, even like 10 years. And these people, I'm seeing some struggle, at least in the beginning, until they figure some things out. Like a couple of them have had gallbladder issues, maybe producing bile in the first few months of transitioning back. Also, other ones are like, they can't get past, it's sort of like a persistent keto flu, perhaps like a vitamin D deficiency going into it. Just other little things, but they're not getting that same result that I got. Like, I felt immediately better, and there was no question in my mind. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing a trend there with long-term vegans, like 5+ years, like we're talking the 8, 10-year vegans. Those are the ones that are struggling, it seems.
Yeah, we see that as humans age in general, and it's not normal. This is not a normal phenomenon, but we see that a lot of people start to lose the capacity to secrete stomach acid. They lose some of this digestive efficiency. And I think veganism probably exacerbates that to some degree. So some people will come into a diet where, they haven't put a piece of meat in their mouth in 10 years. And all of a sudden they try to eat it and they have a difficult time digesting it. And because they've lost some of that normal capacity that we're supposed to have as healthy human beings. And so that can certainly take a period of time. We also see things like, people that have an oxalate-rich diet, which plant-based diet might be high in oxalates, and so some people will have a sort of buildup of oxalates throughout their body, and then oxalates are deposited throughout the body. Most notably, we think about them as physicians because they're the primary cause of kidney stones, and so we see these calcium oxalate stones. But to be honest, the oxalates accumulate in every single tissue in our body, including our brain. And so as we sort of leave that stuff, some people will find that those oxalates will now start to suddenly precipitate. They go against a diffusion gradient. So we see this precipitation of oxalates into the digestive system, into the fluids, into the joints, into the skin. And so some people will have issues with that. So I think that may be one sort of aspect, of that. But again, many vegans, I mean, it's literally repulsive to them to eat meat. They've kind of trained themselves that I'm eating a dead animal. This is a cute, furry little, cute little cuddly cow calf or something. They've got this in their mind that they don't want to do that anymore. And so sometimes there's just a physical difficulty just consuming enough, because again, if you're going from a plant-based diet, which is necessarily often, well, generally, there's some people that do vegan keto, which is kind of goofy, but most people are on a high carb vegan. Most people are on a high carb diet when they're vegan, and transitioning to basically more of a fat-based metabolism can result in fatigue, because you're not able to process and utilize the fats as well initially, and you're dependent upon the glucose still. So yeah, I mean, certainly we see that to some degree. And I started a Facebook group called the Restoration Health Vegan Recovery Group. We've got about 1,500 ex-vegans in there. Nice. And they're all talking about what they do to sort of transition and how they've made it better. But yeah, there are some people that it takes a while because they often they'll do, for some reason, it seems like fish and eggs seem to be the go-to food for ex-vegans first. They feel like they're doing the least, I don't know, maybe they feel like they're doing the least harm, or they've heard that red meat has been so demonized that they think that maybe fish is a little safer, or maybe the fish aren't as smart as cows or something like that. And so they go with that, and then it takes them a period of time. In fact, my girlfriend, who I've been with, 6.5 years, when I met her, she was a vegetarian, and I wasn't a carnivore yet, but I was kind of in this paleo thing. And she was a 20-year vegetarian, kind of had just started transitioning into fish, and had all kinds of digestive issues. And now she's 98% carnivore, and no problems. She's doing great and just doing wonderful. But I think it can take a period of time for that adjustment to happen, for sure.
Can I make one last point here, Charles?
No worries, dude. Go for it.
So you made a point about how vegans convince themselves that meat is basically this, the furry animal or whatever. They couldn't possibly consider eating animal foods again. But it's funny because one of the things that I criticize vegans for, among all else, is being arrogant. Is that the arrogance is astounding on their part. And the reason why I say that in this particular situation is because they're not coming from a perspective of starvation or survival. So when they say that they would never eat meat again, that's because they are fed. They're full. They can buy the quinoa on the shelves, right? No problem, or the acai bowls that are flown in from Ecuador. They don't need to actually try to survive on their own. But if they were ever put in that situation where they go 2-3 days without food, all of a sudden that bunny rabbit is going to start looking like food to them.
Well, I mean, if we look at, plant-based diets in general, something like 95% of the world's population that pursues a plant-based diet does it out of necessity, not by choice. And so, most people, particularly people that are strapped for food resources, given the opportunity to eat animal products, will eat it in a heartbeat. I mean, they will. I mean, if you brought a cow into some starving village in Africa, I mean, that cow isn't going to last, 5 minutes, if they're allowed to eat it. I mean, they know that's where the nutrition is. Every single indigenous tribe in the world, it doesn't matter, even if they're in the tropics. I mean, they'll devote 5-6 hours a day hunting, even if they've got fruit all around them, and they could eat that. I mean, they know that animal nutrition is so incredibly vital to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, no one in the United States is really starving. I mean, we've got some poor people, but realistically, I mean, if we compare that to other places, I've been all over the world. I mean, go to Afghanistan, go to Africa, and you see people that are actually really starving. And yes, absolutely, none of those people would voluntarily elect to be on a plant-based diet. The only people that can do a plant-based diet are people that are living in a society where they have a lot of wealth and affluence. And I mean, that's the only way you can make that choice. And so, when it comes to animal death and suffering, if you have the affluence to make the choice to eat plant-based, then you also have the affluence and choice to eat, an ethically sourced animal-based diet, say a grass-finished cow, which will cause far, far less suffering, far less animal suffering. I mean, it's just undeniable that eating one grass-fed cow, which would likely feed you for a year, is going to cause less deaths than eating any kind of plant-based diet or even any kind of omnivorous diet. So the most ethical diet possible from an animal suffering standpoint is going to be a grass-finished cow. I mean, that's just the way it is. So if you're doing it for the animals, I mean, if you want to eat for the animals, that's what I would say you need to do. Now, not everybody needs to do that or has to do that. And again, this is an ethics, and somebody's ethics, just because your ethics say so-and-so, doesn't mean that has to be my ethics. I mean, I'm not there for animal cruelty. I've got dogs, I've got animals, I've got turtles and fish, and I like animals, but at the same time, I know I got to eat them, or at least I know to be, optimally healthy, I need to eat them. And I've made that calculation that, for human beings, for me, it means a lot of cows typically, or, a cow or two a year. And I've already made that decision, and that's fine with me. We could say that, I don't understand the argument where they say all animals and they won't even eat a scallop. I mean, it's like, come on. I mean, it's like, it's interesting. If we look at an evolutionary scale, if we look at like shellfish, people are like, I'm not going to eat lobster, I'm not going to eat shrimp because they have sentience. Well, insects actually evolved out of the water from these arthropods that were in the water first. So insects are even more evolved than a lobster. So if you're not going to eat lobster, then you have no problem with all these insects dying for your food. Now, remember, what does a pesticide do? Because people talk about intent, right? Well, what is the intention of a pesticide? I mean, the word says it, kill pests, right? I mean, that is an intentional act that people spray on crops to kill not millions, not billions, but trillions of insects. I mean, trillions of insects are killed, and they're just as sentient as a damn lobster you're refusing to eat.
Not only that, but those are actually getting into the food supply and also harming humans in the end anyways.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I mean, I think the thing about pesticides is, I mean, where do pesticides that humans beings come from? Where do the majority of our pesticides come from? And if we look at it, you can look at Bruce Ames' study from 1990, 99.99% of the pesticides that humans consume are already made within the plants themselves. I mean, all these plant foods, all these, polyphenols, all these glycoalkaloids, all these, oxalates and tannins and so on and so forth. Those are just pesticides. Those things are designed to kill bugs, and we eat them in massive amounts, far more, larger quantities than we eat of glyphosate or any other, or paraquat, what they used to use before they used glyphosate. So the pesticide argument, to me, while it's probably, you can make that argument. I mean, if you're gonna complain about pesticides, and just don't eat plants in general, because you're getting far more of them just from eating a bowl of spinach.
Yeah, good stuff. By the way, Drew, do you want to add something before I go?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Thank you for the questions. I really liked it. Yeah, something I want to add as well. I had to take notes because you said so many great things. Something I want to add as well is when I was vegan, I also thought that red meat is super bad for my health. But then I checked out David Klurfeld's work. He wrote an article on how they decided on the WHO board that red meat is basically cancerogenic. He wrote how they chose that this is like detrimental for your health. And actually, I guess 7 out of 14 people on that board were either Seventh-day Adventists or vegetarians. So not even the WHO, is this non-biased group that you all think. And this also really opened my mind. So now I have no idea who I should trust. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Professor Klurfeld. Yeah, he is a lifelong, researcher. Yeah, he sat on the IRC panel that met in 2015 in Lyon, France, and where they came up with the decision that red meat was a class 2 carcinogen, processed meat was a class 1. And yeah, he wrote a nice article entitled, I think it's called The Role of Red Meat in a Healthy Diet or something like that. It was a 2018 paper. And he details the fact that, I mean, basically the IRC had all this data, 800 epidemiologic studies that discussed red meat and cancer, and they threw out 770 of them, just threw them out because they didn't conclude that red meat caused cancer. So they kept something like 30 studies. They had like 25 animal studies. They kept 6, threw out 19 because 19 didn't support that conclusion. So they threw out all the data that didn't support their conclusion, focused on the stuff that did support their conclusion, had very extremely weak epidemiology with relative risks of like 17%. Remember, you need at least a 100% increase for it to even be considered causal. So they had nowhere near that. And then they said, well, we've got some mechanistic data. So they take some weakly done rat studies. The rats don't even get cancer, by the way. They get some early precancerous changes. And these are rats, remind you, that have been genetically bred to get cancer, that are fed a powerful carcinogenic substance. They are fed a little bit of meat plus like a bunch of sugar, and they show a mild, precancerous, potentially cancerous change. And that's where the data comes from. So it's absolute garbage. But Clearfield was right. He said that, he was talking and he looked around and he saw that a high percentage of people on the panel were either vegan, vegetarian, or Seventh-day Adventist. Seventh-day Adventists are religious people that have infiltrated nutrition science. In fact, our American Dietary Association, which was founded in 1917, was started by Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarians that believe meat is sinful, it causes lust, it makes you masturbate, so on and so forth. So they hate red meat to start with. So he pointed that out to the group and said, hey, we should probably disclose this information, that we have a lot of sort of people that are philosophically biased on this committee. And they said, no, we don't think we need to disclose this. And so it wasn't disclosed. And so, I don't necessarily, the science is just bad. It doesn't point to, it certainly doesn't prove that red meat causes cancer. In fact, if you want to say epidemiology is largely garbage, the only time that unless it has some huge increase, like the smoking data, where it wasn't a 17% increase, it was a 2,000, 3,000% increase in the incidence of lung cancer for smokers versus non-smokers. So this 17% stuff is meaningless garbage. But if we want to look at epidemiology and say, how can we use epidemiology to get some decent data? So if there's an association, if there's a 17% association, you can say, well, that could be anything. It could be healthy user bias. There's 10,000 things that could cause this. But if there's no association at all, then that means there's no association. And so is there epidemiologic data that shows no association between red meat and colorectal cancer? Well, guess what? Almost the entire Asian epidemiologic database, shows every time we look at red meat, there's no relationship between red meat and colorectal cancer. It doesn't matter if it's cooked. It doesn't matter if it's raw. It doesn't matter if it's processed. And Asia is not a small place. How many people live in Asia? 4.5 billion people. Most of the people on the planet live in Asia. And if they eat red meat, there's no increased risk. It's only when you go into Western cultures. So are the Asians genetically resistant to red meat causing cancer? Well, what happens when you bring Asians to the United States? Guess what? Their colorectal risk goes up. So that shows you that there's no actual relationship with red meat and cancer in this huge population. So no association means no association. When you bring it over to Western society and they adopt Western cultural habits. And how do we typically eat red meat in the United States? It's most often served with a Coca-Cola, French fries, and a wheat bun. And so that is probably, as simple as that, what it is.
Exactly. And in the US, I guess they also don't move a lot, and it's like all these factors. They have like blue light before they go to sleep, lack of vitamin D, all the bad stuff. So it just accumulates at the end of the day.
Yeah, if we look at the risk factors for colorectal cancer, just the well-known risk factors. Even if we accept the World Health Organization data, which I don't accept, but even if you do, 17%, and then we say, well, what other things lead us to a risk of colorectal cancer? Well, obesity is way, way, way more significant. We look at the studies on that, we see something like a 300% risk. So if you're obese, if we look at visceral adiposity, there's something like even like a 600% increase. If we look at things like hyperinsulinemia, we have something like a 300% increase. If we look at chronic inflammation, we have something like a 300% increase. If we have inflammatory bowel disease, that's Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, now our risk goes up to 3,000%. Now, what happens when you put people on a carnivore diet to all those things? They usually get leaner, their visceral body fat goes away, their hyperinsulinemia improves, their inflammation improves, and if they have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, that often improves. So tell me, what is your overall risk in that situation? When if you add up all those things together and you say that puts my risk up by 5,000% versus 17%, which is more important? So I think we can't be so reductionist. And the same thing with cholesterol. You can't be so reductionist in your thinking. You have to look at all of the things that impact us systemically. We are not just, it's not just a on-off switch. I mean, there are thousands of things that affect, our risk for disease and how we maintain our health.
Beautiful. Drew, you want to say something? I see you twitching.
Yeah, I was. I don't want to get Dr. Baker in trouble here, but I mean, I do believe you have a military background, right? So you've got between the military background, between the doctor, the whole doctor society, big organizations. I just wanted to point out that people's willingness to just kind of go along with what an authority tells them, like World Health Organization, I've never even heard of them until I went vegan. And now vegans use this WHO as this guiding light. To me, it's like the UN, and like they get stuff wrong all the time that's heavily criticized. They make dumb decisions just because a big organization says that this is the way to go. Usually they're trying to appease many groups, and generally a bad result is the outcome of that. And on top of that, there's money and influence and things like that. It doesn't matter that a large organization says that this is now the guideline. I don't understand why people are so easily buying into these things. And again, most vegans never even heard of the World Health Organization until they went vegan. So they weren't making any decisions on life until they went vegan based on this large organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we have this sort of deference to authority and organization. We say it all the time. They're like, well, this guy, had $50 million in NIH funding. I see Joel Kahn makes that argument with regard to Walter Longo to me all the time. Saying, well, he's got all this money for research. I said, well, that's fine, but he's still telling you to eat friggin' candy bars. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, when we look at these big population recommendations, again, this makes some assumptions. If you are going to continue to eat the standard American junk food diet, then yes, it probably makes sense for you not to have high cholesterol. I mean, there is some truth to that. But at the same time, it doesn't apply to all people equally. And so I think anytime we have these broad sweeping guidelines, we have to say, does that apply to me in my situation? And if the answer is no, then you don't have to listen to that guideline. I mean, you have to look in the mirror. Let's be honest with ourselves. If the World Health Organization tells me to eat a certain diet, or the USDA tells me to eat a certain diet, and I eat that diet and I'm fat and I'm miserable, look in the mirror. I mean, it's as simple as that. If somebody says go eat a vegan diet and you get healthier, well, great. Do what's right for you. Now, again, we can argue about the best diet. I mean, I'm not here to say carnivore is the best diet in the world, even though I think it probably is a very good diet. At the end of the day, you've got to trust yourself. And even some physicians don't know how to accurately assess people's health. It's not that they may not know it, but some of them just flat out don't know. Most of them don't have time. And so you've got to take it upon yourself. No one has an interest in your own health like you do. I mean, you are the biggest advocate for yourself. And so if you can't, assess your own health, then it's kind of hopeless. And so you've got to get in there. You got to look in the mirror. You've got to be honest with yourself. And that is how I would say approach your health. Don't just blindly, we call them sheeple, right? They're just blindly following the herd, being told whatever they're told. And yes, there are vested interests. Yes, there are financial conflicts of interest. Yes, these big guideline companies or big guideline organizations take millions upon millions of dollars in donations and research funding from these corporations that produce pharmaceuticals and produce food. So yes, there's huge conflicts of interest, and you can't just know who to trust. I mean, don't even listen to me. Don't trust me. Trust yourself. And I try to tell people that trust yourself and be objective about it.
That's the problem with the vegan dogma, though, is through their religion, they cannot try the other side. And that's the danger. That's what I point out all the time. Like a lot of these guys, they would know within 24 hours if what we're saying is true by just going and eating some, really high quality salmon and eggs. But yet because of their religious mindset over it, they cannot even experiment with it. And to me, that's the biggest danger of the whole thing.
Yeah. It's like a mental illness almost. When I bought my first fish after 3 years, I planned to eat it on a Sunday. I had to postpone it for like 2 days. I was mentally not able to eat the fish. It was so weird looking back.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at you, I mean, you guys are both young guys. I mean, I'm a guy here sitting in my 50s. I've been around for a while, but I mean, veganism is it's for the most part, and most of it's female. And you guys know that most vegans are female, and so, and a lot of it may just be a damn eating disorder. But I mean, this is who's being sort of sucked into this. And guess what? When you're young, and I can tell you, somebody, I've been on this planet for 52 years. When you're young, you can get away with a lot of stuff in your diet. You can eat a garbage diet. You can live on there are guys in the NFL, top level athletes that live on junk food, and they are so genetically gifted and still young enough that they can sort of deal with that stuff. And so the problem is, people will sit there and they'll go vegan extra hard. They'll buy into the ideology, in their youth, and then they don't know what to expect after. As they sort of feel good for 6 months because they've come off junk food, maybe, for those that do that. And then as they slowly start to maybe draw on their own reserves, maybe they can kind of mitigate that some with enough supplementation and diet, but they're slowly sort of, slowly getting worse. It may take a long time to get out of that sit. And so it's like the smoking. I mean, people right now are being drawn to veganism, and it's, these big food companies, these processed food companies right now that are propping it up. They are all in on veganism, because you look at, Beyond Meat or Impossible Burgers, they have their valuations in the billions of dollars. The fake meat industry is an $11 billion industry, projected to go to 25 billion by 2025. So there are billions and billions of dollars of money on the line for people wanting you guys to demonize meat, get meat out of the market. And it's not to make everybody vegan. This is a thing people don't understand. It's to get guys like me, or not even me, but people that used to be like what I was 10 years ago, where I would say, okay, I'm going to eat meat, maybe instead of 4 times a week, I'm going to eat it 2 times a week. And the other 2 days, it's going to be the Beyond Meat burger, because I don't know. I'm too stupid to read the label. I'm just going to go in there and eat that. And I think I'm going to do better. I think I'm going to help my health. And I think I'm going to help the planet. That is where, that's where they're going to make their money. But they're using vegans just to kind of sound the alarm and be the environmental alarmists and, that sort of stuff. And so it's kind of what's that?
The vegans are happy to do free marketing because they think that this is an amazing new product. It's something that's going to help the world and further their agenda and get more people to go vegan. But they don't even realize that probably 90% of the people that are going to be, producing the revenue for Beyond Meat are going to be omnivores. They're not even going to be actual vegans, because there's not that many vegans to begin with, and they're broke, by the way, a lot of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not. I mean, and most vegans that the quote unquote whole food plant-based diet folks probably are not going to want to eat that stuff, because some of them, the ones that are actually intelligently doing a vegan diet, and there are some that do that, even though it's not an optimal diet, will probably realize that this is just basically a chemical shit burger. I mean, it's a bunch of slop, and they're not going to eat it, and so really who's going to eat it is, you're right, it's the omnivores that are too stupid. I mean, it's really just people that are already eating processed food, and they're just going to eat more of it. I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm going to do my part to save the planet by eating more processed food. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's just, you think about it, this is a problem. Again, this is this reductionism we see all around us. So if we look at it, what does the U.S. healthcare sector do as far as greenhouse gases? Does anybody know the answer to that? So about 10% of our greenhouse gases in the United States are produced by the U.S. healthcare industry. So our healthcare sector produces 10% of our greenhouse gases. All of agriculture produces 9%. Animal agriculture produces 4%, and cows produce 2%. So what's better? Being sick and eating processed food and running 10% greenhouse gases through the hospital systems, or eating cows and being healthy and not using the hospital systems? I mean, it's again, we have to get away from this, black and white reductionism, because it just doesn't make sense. It's insanity.
Yes. Drew, you want to add something?
No, not necessarily.
I guess this was a good end message, because I know you need to go soon, right?
Yeah, I got another podcast here in about 15 minutes. I got some folks coming out to the house. The bus driver dude or something like that. He's got some kind of roving podcast, so he's gonna come over with his film crew and do some stuff.
How much time do you have left right now?
I can go for another 10 minutes or so. It should be fine.
because I just wanted to end something here at the end, also for people watching, because I was also I'm still in that mindset of, okay, I cannot eat too much meat, otherwise I will get sick long term. And a book that actually Tristan Haggard, like I know you had him also on your podcast, aka Primal Edge Health, recommended me a book by Vilhjalmur Stefansson. It's called The Fat of the Land. And he was actually a researcher that lived with the Inuit, I guess in the 30s, for over a year or even longer. And it's just a beautiful book because he really shares his experience with these people and how also socially conditioned he was. Because the first time he had to eat, I guess it was rotten fish liver or something like that. First, he didn't want to eat it because he thought that, okay, I will get sick on the spot. But then as he tried it more and more, he started to like it. And he also said most of our food preferences are also kind of socially conditioned. So it's a really interesting book, and I can recommend it to everyone listening because it really also helped me to kind of get on the other side of the coin and to see that side.
Yeah, I mean Stefansson, he's of Icelandic origin. He actually lived in Canada, but yeah, he lived up with the Inuit actually for about 12 years. Up there in the early part of the 20th century, rather, around 1910 to 1920. And then in 1928, he entered famously the Bellevue Hospital for a year to do the carnivore experiment. So he did a 1 year. Him and his buddy Carson Anderson, they entered the metabolic ward of Bellevue Hospital in New York and they were there for a period of time. And they were studied for a year, showing and proving that you could live on a carnivore diet for a year, and they had no issues with any kind of deficiencies whatsoever. So there were 6 peer-reviewed state papers that came out of his experience. And that book, Fat of the Land, is pretty interesting. Talks about, how they, the Inuit lived and how they lived basically on just animal products. And he said the other population where the only thing you need to eat is meat and you're fine. And there's no problem whatsoever. The people have been doing this for, millennia. And these people were just very, very healthy. They were free of chronic disease. Now, people will say though they didn't live super long. Well, I mean, it's one of these things that we look at. Indigenous populations never live long. They live 60, 70, some 80s and 90s. Some of them. Even today, if we look at some of the Inuit that live in northern Canada, they recently had a whale hunt. They still do whaling. As one of the few primitive populations that are allowed to do that. The oldest guy in the whale hunt was 92. So he's still out there in his 90s, out there hunting whales, and you can imagine that's not an easy thing to do.
What a badass!
So I mean, people have been living on basically meat-only diets for a long, long, long time. And it shouldn't be surprising that we have people that are doing it now and doing just fine.
Why do the vegans say that the Inuit are riddled with osteoporosis when they bring up the old bones? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So one is, I mean, a lot of times, well, they point to some of these Inuit studies from the 50s and the 70s saying that they had atherosclerosis, and again, this is well after Inuits were exposed to flour and sugar and all this other stuff. So those things aren't really relative. But I mean, they look at some of the mummies and stuff like that, and there were some studies showing that the Inuit bones had thinner cortices. But there was no evidence of fracture, and so we don't know if it's something different with the quality because there's no significant fracture risk, and so it's kind of because I've looked as an orthopedic surgeon, I looked into some of this stuff, and they really had basically bones that didn't break, even though they might have had in some of the cases they had differences in bone density. And honestly, I don't know that we have enough information to really say based on that stuff. Quite honestly. We do know that they had, much better teeth. They had, we can look at historically bones. I don't know if you guys know this, but when man adopted agriculture about 12 to 10,000 years ago, something like that, if we compare the fossil records between previous, hunter-gatherer societies who lived on, a lot of meat and they probably gathered a few things as well, they were about 6 inches taller. And they had much thicker bones and they had much larger muscle insertions. And they also had a brain that was about 200 cc's bigger than what happened once we had adopted a plant-based agricultural diet. And then humans' brains shrunk and humans got smaller and weaker and more frail. And so that's, just some of the skeletal records. I've seen a number of people now on a carnivore diet that have gone, and particularly ex-vegans. There's a gal now named, she's biohacking Czech, Sylvia Tabor. She did an experiment where she took her bone mineral density before and after carnivore, she had gained significant bone mineral density. going from a non-meat base to a meat base. And I think it's not necessarily calcium, it's protein. Our bone, remember, our protein is our bone is made out of protein primarily, and then we just lay a mineral, kind of we mineralize that protein later. And so animal protein has clearly been shown in a number of studies to be more beneficial for preventing fractures.
Well, there's no question in my mind when I was doing a low protein diet as a vegan, when I was doing like truly whole foods plant-based, where I'm struggling to even get in 60 to 80 grams of plant protein a day, 100%, I noticed a difference in especially my forearms. I've always had kind of skinnier wrists, so it's very easy for me to see that area, and it's kind of a benchmark for me. Back in the day, I would pinch my wrist like this when I was working out, and it would
like
be and now I can wrap my whole hand or my fingers around my wrist very easily, because not only just how lean I am, but also like I feel that my forearms and my bones there actually got a lot smaller, especially eating the very low protein 30 to 50 grams a day, like mainly fruit type diet. Not only smaller, but also more pliable. Like I could literally feel my wrists in that area getting almost Gumby like a like plastic, basically, not hard dense bone. And it was something that was very strange to me, and now it's harder, but also it's not like it's magically grown back overnight because I'm eating beef, but it feels harder. It doesn't feel flimsy anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'd be interested to it would be interesting to have gotten an X-ray or a DEX on you, before and after, to see, if it has an effect. Yeah, we again, there are a number of potential problems with a vegan diet. I mean, not everybody has them, but I mean those are there, and we see that a lot of people struggle to do a vegan diet, correctly, or even if they're able to do one. I think that's the thing, and we talk about conversion of retinol, or sort of beta carotene into retinol and things like that. Some people can do it better than others, and it may explain why some people last a bit longer than others. But yeah, there are some definite shortcomings to the diet. I think that unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are sort of wanting to do it for whatever reasons, and it's good to have people that at least have told them that there are potential problems with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's a good end message for everyone listening. If you want to know more, please subscribe to Dr. Baker's YouTube channel, and especially subscribe to his podcast. I'm also on his Patreon, where I can get the episodes, I guess, 1 week prior or something like that. So I really enjoy that. And also, where can people contact you the best? I know you have a podcast and the YouTube channel, but you also have a website, right? And also a book coming out, I've heard.
Yeah. So I got a lot of things coming up, guys. So, I'm pretty active on social media. So my Instagram, Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER, 1967. I'm pretty active there. I do some stuff on Twitter as well. So those are probably the two biggest social media places. Twitter, I'm SBakerMD. YouTube, I've got a channel. It's just Shawn Baker, SHAWN, BAKER. And I think if you put in carnivore with that, it'll be easy to find. And then we have the World Carnivore Tribe on Facebook, which is about 30,000 people now. So I sometimes kind of hang out there. I've got a website, shawn-baker.com, which, I've got some stuff, writings on there, some links to some interesting stuff. We do have a podcast called the Human Performance Outliers Podcast that myself and Zach Bitter co-host, which is, I think, some pretty interesting stuff. We got some pretty good people on there, and I think it's a lot of people are enjoying that. It's getting a lot of popularity now, which is cool to get the message out there. And then, I do have a book coming out called The Carnivore Diet, and it's just by Shawn Baker, MD. Should be out later this summer. And then one other thing, so we're starting up the animal-based nutrition network.com, and it's going to basically be a place where people that are wanting to pursue animal-based nutrition, whether it's carnivore or carnivore adjacent or keto carnivore, whatever, just basically eating a lot of meat, can go, and they'll have access to physicians that will support them if they need a physician to either visit locally or perhaps online. We'll connect people with ranchers and producers if they want to get their meat directly sourced from the rancher, which I think is a great thing. It'll have coaches, people that maybe want to do some health coaching and training, or fitness type stuff, recipes for people that want to be creative with carnivore diets or meat-based diets. There'll be resources for research because we're going to try to compile all the research that supports what we say, and then hopefully stimulate getting some more research actually done. We'll have things like environmental things. We can talk about the environmental stuff, ethical stuff, and then probably a political outlet so we can become politically active to sort of protect the right to eat an animal-based diet, so we don't end up with kids being forced to eat vegan food, once a week, like they're doing in the New York public school systems and some of these other places where they're kind of legislating what we eat, which I think is just absolutely tragic. I think we should be, if nothing else, you and I should have the right to eat like we want, whether it's vegan, carnivore, omnivore, Mediterranean. I don't care if you want to eat horse manure. I mean, you should have the right to do that. I mean, it should be up to you, and we shouldn't legislate what people eat. And then also we might even have like a dating site where we have people that want to do that. So anyway, that's coming up. So animalbasednutritionnetwork.com. It's going to be coming out soon. In fact, I have a business meeting with these guys later today to discuss when we're going to launch that.
Awesome.
So hopefully soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Baker. I really appreciate the fact that you took over 1 hour of your day to speak to us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best for the future. I'm definitely going to link all the links down below that I can find that exist right now. And have a good day. Thank you so much. And perhaps see you again.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for having me on. And Drew, if you get the video of the person trying to meet and how it goes, send it to me and I'll see if I can get it reposted for you, man. It'll be fun to see how that goes.
That sounds good. I hope to meet you soon. I'm up in Orange County, so we're not too
far.
Oh,
you're in Orange County? Hell yeah. You got to come by and come have some steak with me sometime, man. I'm just, where do you live?
I live in Tustin, and I know Lisa's moving down there real soon. So
okay, yeah, you guys ought to come by. Yeah, I'm in Laguna Hills, so it's only we're about 30 minutes away. Yeah, so we're close. What's that?
Oh, you're in San Diego.
No, I'm in Laguna Hills right now. I was in Dana Point prior, and I just moved, so we're just close. So yeah, you guys have to come down by at some point. Yeah, I think Paul Saladino is coming down. He's moving down to, I think close to Oceanside. So we'll probably have some meetups so we can have some little carnivore hangouts and get some stuff going. So that'd be great. So awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, take care. I got to go do another podcast.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, you can just leave the call and me and Drew are going to wrap it up.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. Okay. Bye, guys.
Good stuff. Awesome, man. My mind is kind of blown. Too much information, dude.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, I love that. I love talking to the people that are specialized more in their areas. We talked to Bart K about scientific stuff, studies. He's going to have such a depth of information there. And then same with Shawn Baker, you start getting into, the bone density stuff and the Inuits and all that. And he's well researched in that, not only because he's this carnivore guy, but also he's a real doctor who has a real background in orthopedic surgery. He really knows this stuff, not some YouTube expert that has read a couple Google articles and is now, regurgitating this stuff on the internet. This guy is actually cut people open, seen what's going on in there, understands it on a much deeper level. We need more people with information like this. And I think this is where the vegan community really lacks, because you have a lot of so-called experts who aren't actually in the field, in the trenches. People have even criticized Dr. Greger recently because he never even saw patients. So I feel like the carnivore side has such a stronger foundation of representatives. On top of that, they've got better studies and information to begin with. So it's just an overall much stronger breadth of evidence.
Yeah, beautifully said. Also realized everything he says, he puts it into context, no black and white thinking whatsoever. And especially the books I've read, he read them all, and I was okay, I was really surprised, because most of them, they don't have the time to read also all this research. So yeah, I'm really glad we had him on.
Yep, definitely.
Nice.
Thanks for having me on as well.
Sorry?
And thanks for having me on as well.
No worries, dude. You can also use it for your channel. Like I said, I mean, it's the best for the movement if this stuff is getting shared.
Absolutely.
We should do that again, by the way, to host people, because I realized you had some really good questions I was not thinking about before. So I really like that we had this back and forth.
Cool. I had them written down. I use my little notepad here. I'm always taking notes during interviews, trying to just expand upon what people say. Sometimes things pop up. Yeah, I was going to ask him about, actually, there's a couple things that I wanted to ask him more about. Maybe we'll save that for next time. But, like his low testosterone results and stuff like that on the blood test. Like I wanted him to explain it now that we've had this fallout. Like we've known about Shawn Baker for over a year now in the public eye, and he had low testosterone back when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He took blood results and he revealed that, and people have criticized him. But at the same time, the dude is setting world records, competing at a very, very high level athletically. And then you have vegans that are like little stick figures saying he had low testosterone and my blood tests show my, it's like, again, he talks about the blood test result and then the clinical result, which is what is actually going on. You can think that you have one thing going on based on your blood test results, and then you go and you take the coronary artery calcium scan, which tells you exactly what's going on, and it shows a score of 0. So which one do you trust? Because the blood test is just kind of giving you a maybe a plausible idea, but the CAC is going to show you exactly what's going on. The clinical results are going to show you what's going on. Are you strong? Yes. Then testosterone isn't really a problem, is it?
Yeah.
So
good points. Good points. I'm just so glad we are in the beginning of this whole new area of research. And actually, yeah, it's funny here. I have a comment in the chat. Drew's got to start a carnivore dating app. Yeah, I wanted to mention that at the end, that you had like a vegan dating app, which was like quite funny that Shawn mentioned that he wants to do like a carnivore dating site.
Yeah, I can help them with that. It's gonna be it's a whole big bone to chew on. Trust me. It's
yeah, can
not
imagine.
Easy.
Can imagine. So, by the way, do you have an end message for the viewers, or do you want to talk something that we talked about in the podcast, or what do you want to do?
Nope, I'm pretty good actually, and I'm going to go for a nice big long walk. I need to keep cutting this belly fat. I had a huge 600 calorie Game of Thrones cupcake last night, and
I saw it on Instagram. Yeah,
I need to get that out of me.
Awesome. Yeah, by the way, I will have Chris Masterjohn on this Friday. I don't know if you are familiar with his work. He was also vegan for a long time. He developed some mental issues like anxiety and some OCD kind of behavior. And now he's not vegan anymore. And he has a PhD in nutritional science, I guess, something like that. And he recently started to go on podcasts. So if you want, you can join me again on Friday. If you have the time, I can send you some videos of his if you are interested to talk to him. If not, I can just do it alone, but just to give it that opportunity, because I really like the back and forth we had.
Cool. I'll look into him for sure. Send me the content. I haven't heard of him.
Awesome. So for everyone watching, we are still live. So thank you so much for watching. I will put all the links we talked about below, also like the books, the articles, David Kluwerfeld, like the WHO, everything. Thank you so much for checking in. Thanks, Drew, for your time. Also, you can go to Drew's channel. I don't know. I guess he will also post on his channel, so you can go to mine, you can go to his, you can go wherever you want. And yeah, just thanks to everyone.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks. Cheers.